Is that?
So you're saying that the remainder, you think the other 170 are going to keep going on Highway 12?
That's all the information we have at this time.
Okay.
The cost to cut the modules is pretty expensive for them. That's why I wouldn't think they'd want to bring them to the Port of Lewiston and cut them. I believe they're cutting them in the Port of Lewiston because of economic issues they've got of trying to get these loads up a different way across. But, I mean, I'm not aware of what that is, why they're cutting these to move these. That would be a question for Exxon and Imperial. But I would tell you that all they've given us is a plan to say, in general, we're planning to cut the current ones in Lewiston and run approximately 60 loads that would be the biggest, the dimensions I gave you, up US95.
Okay.
That's all that I know of.
I guess I have other questions for Exxon and Imperial then. But maybe another question for ITD is, what's ITD's plan for informing the public about that which you've been informing us tonight? So are there going to be opportunities for the public to be able to understand the plan between Lewiston and Coeur d'Alene, including Moscow?
I believe, and once again, what we have is a traffic control plan at this time, but we'll certainly pass that on to ExxonMobil and Imperial Oil, their partner of ExxonMobil, of making sure that they do PR work. They do have a public relations team. They've set up they're going to be setting up a website for people to go to, and they're going to be doing a lot of publicity so that people will be able to find out as much as they need to know about what that load will have on an impact on them as far as motorists on the highway. So I know there will be a lot of that. There will be a lot of information out there that tells you how you go about finding out what that load would have as far as your concerns or impacts that it might have on you as a motorist driving through there, or someone that might have some other interest or concern in that load.
Okay.
Contact them. You bet.
I'm sorry, just one last one. So it sounds like the timing is going to be such that the trucks are going to come through Moscow right about the time that bars let out. Is that right? I mean, around 2 o'clock, right around 2 o'clock, that's when so that might be an option, or that might be something where the police are interested in. Yeah,
they are planning, remember Lamar, to, as I said, to travel about 12 miles an hour through Moscow. And as Dave's mentioned, they have braking systems on all their axles. They're going to be out observant, watching. It's like this will be one more vehicle added to the vehicles that currently pass through Moscow when bars let out tonight. And so those issues will still be there, and these people will have all been inspected by a commercial vehicle safety inspector. So we know all this equipment will be in good working order, and we know that all these people will be alert and aware and awake. So you're going to have the best driver combination you could have. At least you don't have the guy who got out of the bar driving off and trying to dodge the guy who's walking out of the bar.
I guess I'm not so worried about the driver of the truck. I invite you or other ITD folks to be in Moscow at 2 a.m. in the downtown area, because there's just a high traffic volume. So it's, at least for a period of time, there's a lot of activity. Maybe that's more on Main Street than on Washington, but it would be worth paying attention to that aspect, and I just don't know if.
We'll certainly pass that on to them as a comment. I think that's a valid point, and we'll make sure they take a look at the pedestrian traffic that might be out coming out of the vehicular traffic. Of course, will have to follow the traffic laws, as they always have to. But we'll make sure that they're aware of the pedestrian traffic, and that they have a pedestrian component in that.
Well, just to follow up on a couple of things that Tom asked, then with regard to Washington Street, if this is a 2-lane width, does that imply that some of the parking on either side of Washington, which is a one-way route through town, would need to be stripped?
It's primarily a 3-lane width for coming through, and since it's flowing on just one side of the couplet, they'll just be delaying the traffic behind them as they come through. And in areas where they have 3 lanes, they'll be moving over so that they can allow a lane of traffic to get around them.
No, what I meant was that
sorry.
Washington Street is one-way northbound, and in some sections of that, there's parking allowed on each side of the street. So if these loads are effectively 2 lanes wide, does that suggest that any of the parking would need to be stripped on one side or the other?
And no, we've done the measurements out there, and so have they, and there's no problem with that.
Okay, and the decibels for people who are trying to sleep through that, do you happen to know how that relates to the city's noise ordinance?
It should be the same as for any other truck coming through town.
They're not noisier.
No, it should be the very same thing. And it's coming through at night like that when your signals are on flash. They should be driving pretty smoothly through town.
Okay, Sue?
My question is the equivalent. How many equivalent logging trucks is one load, or how many equivalent chip trucks? Because that's what comes through town. But usually starting at 5 in the morning. They usually don't start before 5. But what's the equivalent?
Well, if you figured a log-in chip truck at 105,500 pounds, which is what most of them can legally haul, you'd be looking at, maybe 2.5
2.5 chip trucks?
in terms of total gross weight.
And how many logging trucks?
Logging trucks usually are running around 80,000, so there'd be, 4 of those maybe.
Okay. Well, one of the other questions from the council. Okay. One of the questions that Tom put forward had to do with opportunities for public input. And as you know, last week I asked for some confirmation from ITD and Imperial Oil ExxonMobil to coordinate a date when we might have a public meeting for input, a two-way conversation with citizens who may wish to weigh in. And I was told that there was nobody from Imperial Oil ExxonMobil available. So I'm hopeful that we might get some kind of a commitment from both ITD and from the oil company to be present at a publicly noticed public forum on or before April 13th, or if it looks like this hauling could be expedited and occur before the 18th, which was the earliest date that I had reported to me from that ITD source last week, then sometime sooner than that. Do you envision such a thing? Because I don't think a website will suffice for the citizens of Moscow, just knowing how we are an engaged community and people, as you know, want to have their piece.
Mayor, when I was asked about that, which was just last week,
I just heard about it, last week.
Well, when I was asked about it last week, I contacted Imperial Oil and asked them if they would be willing to do that. And so that's kind of where it sits. It's with them as a private company. If they'd be willing to do that, there's no requirement that they have to. They've been cooperative, and as soon as we hear if they would be willing to do that, we'll certainly set up a meeting at a time when they can attend.
Okay, well, I'm most interested at a time when the citizens of Moscow can be there. What we had originally hoped for was this coming Wednesday from 7 till 9 p.m. when people are off work and whatnot. Clearly, that's not going to work now because of the short notice time, but that's the sort of thing, an evening event when people who might want to weigh in could do so. I know that there's not a legal requirement to provide for this public input, but I think that there ought to be an ethical requirement to do so. It's troublesome to me that we have been out of the loop and really appear to, our opinions as a community, as a local government, haven't seemed to have been considered in this case. And I'm very concerned about hauling these big loads through the core of town on a one-way street, potentially for months or years to come. And seems like, well, we don't know is probably a truthful but not a very reasonable answer for any of us. And I would hope that you could be informed by the oil company as well. We've worked closely with you, Jim, and we appreciate your participation in Moscow Transportation Commission meetings and your willingness to come to meetings like this. And I know that it's not the most comfortable spot to stand. I understand.
Actually, I'm feeling pretty good.
Are you? Okay.
I'm fine with it, Mayor.
Okay.
I'm not sure I'm fine with anybody questioning my ethics, but I would.
No, I'm
I
not
would-
questioning
I would
your
go so-
ethics. I'm speaking, pardon me, Jim, for interrupting. I'm not speaking of yours. I'm just saying that I think in the great scheme of things, even large corporations ought to have a place for saying, you know what, this is just the right thing to do. I'm not impugning your integrity.
What I've asked to do, Mayor, was I asked if ExxonMobil would do it. They said they would check through with their headquarters and see if they'd be willing to do it, and they'd get back with me. And as soon as I know, I will let you know, and we would do that. As I've said before, we got word of this, to my knowledge, about 3 weeks ago, plus or minus a little bit in there, through our staff. And so we're getting this request, and we're now developing this. Till we really get a traffic control plan that our staff says will even meet the requirements. They don't have anything. And they're at that point. When we met the last time for the meetings that we did for US-12, we had a traffic control plan from them that we had approved, and we were ready to move on. We had something more to share. Right now, up until this point, while you have knowledge that they're going on out there, we're also learning and getting back to them to make sure that we've got them with a plan that is acceptable to us. And there were parts of their initial draft that were not, and so they've been sent back, and they're working on their part of their plan to get it to where we would accept it. And then I think that's a really appropriate time for us to have any kind of public meeting that we would like to see on that basis of that. And as you know, I'm fine with a public meeting, and certainly feel there's ITD is a public agency, and we're your agency. And it's our intent to answer your questions and to answer the questions of anybody else that would have them. And so we want to make sure that not only do we have a public meeting where some people can participate, but we also have a website, areas for people that either can't make those times or are uncomfortable speaking in front of a group or don't want to be involved in that group or would have a diverging opinion and not be comfortable with the way that might go. So we want to make sure everybody has a chance across there. And I do think a public meeting, if Imperial Exxon is interested in doing that, would be a good stroke on their part.
And if they're not, are you or other representatives from ITD willing to participate in such a meeting?
I'm right here today.
There you are. And then you mentioned giving the public different modes of communicating. Do you have some addresses to offer, either postal addresses, email addresses, that sort of thing that we can
Well, we've got, they're supposed to have a website up and running by the end of this week.
Mm-hmm.
And so as soon as we have that, we'll pass that on to your city clerk. Would that be appropriate?
Maybe a press release or something like
Oh,
that?
I'm
so the
sure
general
you'll get a
public
press
can know?
release that'll come on ITD, because you've seen press releases on every one of these items as it comes through. But we can personally contact city clerk if you'd like with their website when they have that. Right now it's not functional, but they are working on it to get it ready. They're also scrambling to get what their plan is into us.
Okay.
And so we'd sure get that to them as well.
Okay. And you indicated other questions, so Les, as Public Works Director, do you have any questions for Jim as might pertain to the integrity of the roadway, the cost for repairs, the load-bearing capacity, the bridge studies, and those sorts of things? Any concerns that you have from your perspective that you would specifically want to have addressed?
Actually, we have talked a little bit about this when the subject first came up. Mr. Carper and I had a phone conversation talking about some of the same information you're hearing this evening in terms of the size of the loads, the weight that's involved, number of axles, things of that nature. In general, I am reasonably comfortable with the information I've heard so far. We've talked a little bit about road conditions and assessments of road condition, whether or not there would be anything that we could look at beforehand, afterwards, as the vehicles are passing through. Keep in mind, though, this is a state facility, and as such, it is the state's responsibility in terms of the condition and maintenance of the roadway. This is not a city roadway, so it would not fall to the city to make such repairs if any were necessary. That would be a state responsibility, and however they've dealt with that situation with the hauler of the equipment. So from that perspective, I don't think there would be an impact to city facilities related to this particular haul route. And we'll continue discussions about if there are other issues that may come into play regarding the traffic plan that ultimately ITD shares with us as they feel it meets their standards for at least review with the local entities.
Thank you, Les. Now, given the budgetary challenges across the state, including Idaho Transportation Department, are there some bonding requirements such that, and we've seen that some of the other highway maintenance issues have been kind of put on hold because of the budgetary constraints. And, if it's, I know this council has talked a lot about Highway 95, Thorn Creek to Moscow, for example. But some of these projects have been delayed, and some of our bridges, for example, are still kind of waiting. Not your fault. It's just a budgetary issue. But if it came to prioritizing repairs to Highway 95, i.e. Washington through the city of Moscow, are there provisions in your permitting process that would require the hauler to pay for those repairs?
Yes, the hauler is always responsible for every permit that ITD issues. They're responsible for damages on if they were to cost them.
Okay.
But if we see anything out there right now, like I said, we make them legalize the load. So the load will weigh the same as any other weighted semi that's coming through town. That'd be the maximum they can per axle, and that's how we design our highways, is off the axle loads. And so that's the best way we can do it to keep it there. And then they pay an additional fee through the permitting process for the fact that their load is worth 3 chip trucks. That's set in Idaho code for a fee that they pay for road damage.
Okay. I know there are some people here tonight who are very interested in this topic, and this was not advertised as a public hearing. I often invite input. I don't know that there's anything to be gained in it tonight, but I want some assurance that we will have a public meeting that will engage at least ITD, ideally somebody from Imperial Oil, ExxonMobil, and or the hauler, and hope that we can get that done soon, get it noticed so the public has a chance to prepare to be there and actually have their say, and also provide those other modes of input for us. We don't know there's anything more to be learned other than the particulars of the permitting process and the hauling schedule tonight.
Mayor,
please.
If there's anything that, if I have not answered a question that you have or any member of the council has that is regarding this, that they have a concern with on Washington Street, as you'd mentioned, coming through Moscow, I would certainly answer it right now. Okay. And deal with it. So, I mean, it's we know a lot about what these the impacts of these loads will be in terms of the weights and those things on the highway and those kinds of issues. So we certainly would like to handle those rather than defer them to any future meeting. This would be a great forum for us to go ahead and address that question.
Okay. Anybody have any other questions for Jim tonight? Okay. If any members of the audience have questions, please email them to the council and me. We'll see that they are conveyed either to ITD or the oil company as soon as we find out the contact information and the date of a public meeting at which input will give and take input. We'll certainly make sure that the public is informed. Anxious to be kept in the loop, Jim. I think it's just really important. I mean, from the earliest. I know that 3 weeks ago isn't very long ago, but it was longer ago than my getting it from Representative Trail secondhand, subsequent to an inquiry from the newspaper editor. So bravo to the Daily News for bringing it to our attention. But I'd like to be kept in the loop. I think it's important for all of us. Well,
our intent was to make sure we had reliable information that was correct when we brought it forward. And so that's until we get our first submittal for a traffic control plan saying what they want to do or what they're going to do, it would be speculative information, and we had not participated in doing that. I wouldn't have had much to have shared other than to say there's 60 loads, we don't know the weight, we don't know the size. There would probably be more questions than there were. We were trying to gather that data. If in doing so, that's caused the city of Moscow some concerns, that was not my intent. Our intent was to come forward to you with information once we had something reliable so that I could give you the actual numbers. But it was never our intent to delay you from hearing information. I don't personally read a lot of newsprint media, so I'm not exactly certain what their stories were about, but I doubt they had the details that I would have tonight to tell you about what was going on in terms of the eventual sizes and widths and how they were going to do their traffic control at that time. But we'll certainly keep that in mind and keep you guys more informed with it. As Les has mentioned, I have talked to Les and to Gary Riedner during the process a little bit. They've been very outstanding in making sure that we know the concerns of Moscow.
Perfect.
And
I had requested, that was at my direction, but I am concerned about the speculation about 340 loads. That would be something we'd want to know about soon, too.
If
Walter,
I
did
knew
you have
that, I
another
would be glad to
question?
pass that on to you.
Yeah, Walter.
Thank you, ma'am. Regarding speculation, the April 18 date that I saw an email on was, I believe, from an ITD employee that said the earliest possible date the permitting process could allow one of these loads was April 18. I don't think we know April 18 any more firm than you knew the size and shape of these things when you first were told they wanted to bring them up 95. So I would hate to see a headline tomorrow saying, everybody turn out at 2 a.m. to watch them go by the bars. I think you might not see anything. They will apparently move at some point in time when ITD gets through their process and when the carrier is ready to move them. And I'm presuming that we will get notice as early before that as it's available in terms of real information.
I intend on making sure you guys have the information almost as soon as I do.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. We appreciate your coming.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, and thanks for having me up here.
Thank you.